Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. My name is Natalia Moczulska and this is the news. Ukrainian troops are already 10 kilometers away from occupied Kherson. On the other hand, in the Donetsk region, the Russian army is trying to encircle the defenders. The Russians control most of Severodonetsk as they cut off the last exit routes from the city. Several hundred civilians took refuge at the local chemical plant Azot. Meanwhile, the authorities in Kiev are constantly calling on the West to supply arms. During the last 24 hours, Russian troops destroyed or damaged 60 buildings in the Donetsk region. Another school has been ruined in Vuhledar. The Ukrainian anti-aircraft defense managed to knock down Russian missiles heading for Khmelnytsky and Zolochiv in the Lviv region. We are dealing with absolute evil, and we have no choice but to move on and liberate our territories, displace the occupiers from all our districts. And despite the fact that the front is already over 2,500 kilometers long, we feel that the strategic initiative is on our side. We will return to all our cities. Hersonia, Melitopol, Mariupol, and Energodar, we will return to our villages. We will rebuild everything that was demolished by the occupiers, from Volnovakhy to Chortkov, because this is Ukraine and it is our role to regain and strengthen it. Soldiers are fighting at the front, and police and other service officers do not leave the cities. They provide the inhabitants with humanitarian aid and help in evacuation. We thank the police for helping to transport people. There are no other possibilities to leave today. Evacuation buses cannot reach us. Under the bullets, the police take out a few people on their own. Although most of the Severodonetsk area is already in the hands of the Russians, fierce street fighting is still taking place there. Due to the increased shelling, the third bridge was ruined, but the city is not cut off. There are still ways to get to the city, quite difficult, but there are. Cities are still defended by our armed forces, although the conditions are very difficult. About 550 people have taken refuge at the Azot factory, and soldiers and the police are trying to help them. There are still food supplies there, but the Russians are destroying the factory buildings completely. Since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has already lost 32,500 soldiers, over 3,500 armored combat vehicles, and 213 aircraft. Harvest is set to begin in the southeastern part of Ukraine in a week's time. In the present war conditions, it will be an extremely difficult challenge for both farmers and the authorities. I am concerned about many issues. War is an obstacle to our normal work. The ongoing blockade of seaports prevents the sale of the grain we have collected. 70% of grain exports went through seaports. In addition, combine operators are afraid to work because of the ongoing combat operations. Delivery is also a big problem, as it is difficult to transport grain from the field to silos or ports under the current conditions. There is also a shortage of fuel, and it is very expensive. We are working on solving the issue of round-the-clock work in the fields under martial law and the curfew. We compile a list of people so that they can work and transport grain from the fields as soon as possible. Every day, evidence of the bestiality of the Russian occupiers is uncovered in Ukraine. Another mass grave was found in the forest near Bucha, near Kiev. The first grave has already been examined by experts. They are men around 40 years old in civilian clothes. One has shot through knees, the other shot through temple. In the second one, bodies were found that also had shot through knees and heads. The bodies of 3 people are still there, but have not been examined. Later this week, the Ukraine prosecutor's office is to start creating an information system, the so-called Book of Executioners, in which the data of the Russian military responsible for war crimes will be published. President Andrzej Duda signed an amendment to the law on the Supreme Court. It eliminates, among others, the disciplinary chamber. It was one of the conditions of the European Commission for the approval of National Reconstruction Plan and the payment of funds to Poland. As of the effective date of the act, the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court will be liquidated, but its judges will be able to adjudicate in other chambers or retire. The Chamber of Professional Responsibility will be created in place of the disciplinary chamber. The changes will help heal the situation in the Supreme Court. The point is that professional responsibility should be well implemented. Deputy Prime Minister Jarosław Kaczyński announced the liquidation of the disciplinary chamber in August last year. During today's press conference, he expressed the hope that the decision of the European Commission on the payment of funds from the Reconstruction Fund would be made as soon as possible. Indeed, the liquidation of the disciplinary chamber was demanded by the European Commission, but we also wanted it. The answer to our plans should be made within 2 or 3 months, and we are waiting much longer. This is a clear breach of the law. The composition of the Professional Accountability Chamber will be elected for a 5-year term. The president will appoint 11 members of the chamber from among 33 previously drawn Supreme Court judges. It will probably be published soon, sometime in mid-July, and the changes envisioned by the Act will begin. In the opinion of the opposition, the Act in its current form does not meet the EU requirements for payments for the implementation of the National Reconstruction Plan. The same judges will be able to join the new chamber. This is inconsistent with the bill that we submitted as the left wing. The Act was passed by the Sejm at the end of May. Senators introduced 29 amendments to it, but the lower house of parliament rejected most of them, including those that provided annulment of the decisions of the disciplinary chamber. The opposition was turning the trial upside down all the time. It is difficult to accept unconstitutional amendments that infringe the principle of irremovability of a judge and amendments aimed at annulment of judgments. The liquidation of the disciplinary chamber was the main condition of the European Commission to approve the National Reconstruction Plan and obtain funds from the Reconstruction Fund for Poland. The European Commission has defined 116 milestones, which will make it possible to clearly define whether Poland qualifies for payments from the National Reconstruction Plan. So nothing should surprise us Poland anymore in the future. As part of the National Reconstruction Plan, Poland will receive almost 107 billion Polish zloty and over 51.5 billion zloty in the form of loans. The funds will be allocated to carrying out 48 reforms and implementing 54 investments. The arrivals come as Britain prepares to send the first flight of asylum seekers to Rwanda. Young children and babies were among dozens of migrants arriving at the port of Dover today in Border Force vessels after attempting to cross the English Channel. Britain has struck a £120 million deal with Rwanda to send some migrants who had arrived illegally by crossing the channel in small boats from Europe. The plan has horrified political opponents, charities, and religious leaders who say it is inhumane. The United Nations refugee chief called it catastrophic. The entire leadership of the Church of England denounced it as an immoral policy that shames Britain, and media reports have said Prince Charles has privately described the plan as appalling. Earlier today, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said his government would keep going with plans to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda, despite a raft of legal challenges.
But I think what opponents of the policy have to say is, well, what is your alternative? What is your alternative to people being shipped across the channel in very frail, unseaworthy dinghies, risking their lives and undermining the rule of law? What's your alternative? We think it's a sensible partnership we've set up with Rwanda. Yes, it may take a while to get working properly, but it doesn't mean we're not going to keep going.
According to government figures, more than 28,500 people were detected arriving in Britain on small boats last year. The government says the deportation strategy is needed to stem the flow of migrants risking their lives in channel crossings and smash the people smuggling networks.
We're trying to make a distinction between legal pathways to the UK, which we support. We want people to be able to come here in fear of their lives, but we want them to do it legally and safely. And that's why we have all the safe and legal routes that are open to people. What we want to do is to show the people traffickers that they're breaking the law, they're risking people's lives, and it won't work anyway. Now, will it be necessary to change some laws to help us as we go along? It may very well be, and all these options are under constant review.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and some of our other programs. But for me, it's have a wonderful evening.